From the Weston A. Price Foundation, welcome to the Wise Traditions Podcast for wise traditions in food, farming, and the healing arts. We are your source for scientific knowledge and traditional wisdom to help you achieve optimal health. And now here is our host and producer, Hilda Labrada Gore.
Hey, Hilda here. Improved digestion, clearer skin, brain fog eliminated. These are some of the benefits that our guest today has enjoyed since she switched to real, nourishing foods and started paying attention to the quality of ingredients that go in and on her body. This is episode 495, and our guest today is Gubba Homestead. Gubba is a leading figure in the homesteading and natural skincare community. Today, she discusses the changes she has made over time and what she has noticed as a result, why she is passionate about our need to pay attention to what we put into our bodies and on them. She also discusses what led to her recent deplatforming on TikTok and how an investigative piece of journalism by the Wall Street Journal did not cite any of the studies that she was quoting that caused her to be deplatformed. She was talking about the dangers of sunscreen. Finally, she reveals today what led her into this homesteading journey and why she believes we can all become homesteaders in our own right, even if we live in a city. Before we get into the conversation, I want to invite you to the Wise Traditions Conference. This October, the 25th to the 27th, we will be in Orlando, Florida. We have a stellar lineup of speakers at the ready, from Dr. Stephen Hussey to Manel Ballister, Sophia Eng, and longtime favorites like Dr. Tom Cowan and Dr. Natasha Campbell McBride. Together, we'll enjoy nutritious food and benefit from the wisdom shared from the stage and from the friends that we make. Visit wisetraditions.org to learn more and get your tickets today. I hope to see you there. This is Hilda Labrada Gore, and you're listening to Wise Traditions. Welcome to Wise Traditions, Gubba.
Thank you so much for having me.
Look, we've all witnessed censorship over the past few years, accounts taken down from different social media platforms or shadow banned, but usually it had to do with shots or, COVID-related materials that were outside of the mainstream narrative. I understand that you were deplatformed with a post that had to do with sunshine. Tell me what happened, what social media platform it was, and why you were taken down.
Yeah, so this all started when I began researching about sunscreen. And I didn't realize it was such a hot topic, because when you look at the research and you're finding these common ingredients are causing serious adverse health effects, I took to my platform because that's what I talk about. I talk about health and homesteading. And I brought up sunscreen, and I did not realize how hot of water that was. It really became a David and Goliath situation. And I was quickly deplatformed on TikTok. I had around 100 or 300,000 followers on there, and they just took me off. And then over on Instagram, I started talking about sunscreen, and I said, hey, are you guys seeing what you are putting on your skin? Look at these ingredients, you guys. These are affecting your hormones. Avobenzone, which is a common ingredient in a lot of sunscreens, is causing abnormal placentation in early pregnancy. Like, what is going on? And what happened over on Instagram is they started to fact check me. And my advice to anybody listening to this, whenever there's a fact check, that means there's some truth around there. That's honestly my opinion. When I see something is fact checked, I know that person's probably talking about something that the system doesn't want people to know. So I started to be fact checked on there when I was talking about sunscreen, and my posts were being labeled as misinformation and dangerous. And what ended up happening is the Wall Street Journal, they reached out to me and said, hey, we want your comments on sunscreen. We see you're posting about it. So I sent them this whole entire write-up with all of the research talking about sunscreen and its health effects. I mean, I quoted 15 different research papers, and I was coming with stats. And when that article came out, they didn't include anything. And I didn't expect them to. Like, let's be real, I didn't expect them to include any of that. But they did not include any of what I said. All they included was opinions from dermatologists and experts, actual research. And so that's when I came over again to my platform and said, hey, let's talk about the research. Let's talk about the statistics. And then I kept getting hit and shadow banned, and my posts were flagged. And it's so crazy. It's really a David and Goliath situation because I'm David. I'm just
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
this little small homesteader.
But who's Goliath? In other words, if the Wall Street Journal was interested in objective reporting, why wouldn't they have scooped up those studies and said, this little homesteader is pointing to these five, even if it was just five? I know it was more than that, but these five studies, why didn't they say that, do you think?
Well, I think it comes down to who is in cahoots with who, who's being funded by who. I mean, big pharma is a trillion billion dollar industry, and sunscreen is a huge, huge moneymaker in many different aspects, from selling the sunscreen, making people think they're going to get skin cancer if they don't wear it, and then the adverse health effects that come from wearing sunscreen. They make money. So my thought is this Goliath is this huge system and they all work together. For example, in one of the misinformation flags that I got when they fact checked me, I went and looked at that fact check and I was like, okay, what kind of science are they using? What kind of research? The researchers that they were using, they had a disclaimer that they were in cahoots with Johnson and Johnson. So they had worked with them previously and things start to add up and you're like, wow, they really are all in this together. So that's the Goliath. And there really is, I feel like, how do you go up against a system like that?
Yeah, and it's interesting that you mentioned Johnson and Johnson because I had never put together the fact that the companies producing the sunscreen might have some associations with the pharmaceutical companies because Johnson and Johnson, didn't they make a COVID shot?
Yeah, they did. They did.
Wow. So even if they're not even, let's say, that directly aligned, they stand to benefit when people are sick, when their hormones are disrupted, when they're having troubles with fertility. They're going to turn to pharmaceutical, what they hope are remedies, right? And then, so it's a moneymaker for them. If people realized all of these creams aren't doing us any good, they're not preventing skin cancer. As a matter of fact, they're enhancing different health issues. Then if the truth got out about that, they would be jeopardizing their livelihood. These companies would be.
Yes, absolutely. And what you brought up is the fertility. Like, fertility is such a huge issue going on right now. There are so many women in my personal circle who are struggling with fertility. And all I can think about is what I'm reading in the research of the sunscreen, healthcare products, our food. But like you said, if that truth got out, then it jeopardizes them and people are going to be angry. But people have outsourced almost their thinking and their trust to these big corporations. So it's difficult to break that barrier to people like, hey, they're lying. They're lying to you and you are being harmed.
Yeah. No, and I'm only laughing because you're right. People aren't always ready to hear that truth. And yet, when you come online, I feel like you're bringing a spirit of gentle reminders. But I am wondering, speaking of gentle, you have such a sweet spirit about you. How did this small little homesteader become this David fighting this Goliath? Like, why were you interested in the sunscreen topic in the first place?
I was interested in sunscreen. So it all boils down to ingredients. For food, it boils down to ingredients. I started reading my food labels and I was like, what am I eating? When it came to skincare, I started reading the ingredients and said, what am I putting on my skin? And then sunscreen, which is such a hot topic. A few summers ago, I stopped eating seed oils and I noticed I didn't sunburn. And that was the first summer I hadn't sunburned. And I was like, wow, this is pretty interesting. So I took that interest and started just looking at the ingredients in sunscreen. And it was mind-boggling to me. I just couldn't believe that people were putting this stuff on their skin, your largest detox organ, and having these chemicals absorb. And so that's why when I find these things, I gently remind people or gently share with people, hey, like, do you know what's going on? It's coming from a loving place because it was
Mhm.
so shocking for me. And when you find that truth, you want to share and help people. And that's what I want to do. I want to help people.
Wow. Oh my gosh. Well, so tell me how you went from wanting to help people to like having this whole big homestead and realizing that food is your medicine. And earlier, just to back up for a second, Gubba, you said something like, I had a feeling the system wouldn't like this, what I was bringing. How did you kind of have that healthy skepticism of big food and big pharma?
Well, when you see the bigger picture of how they are, like we discussed, harming people, when our food has all these chemical toxic ingredients, and then people get sick, they go to the doctor and they get prescribed something from the doctor that then puts money into big pharma's pockets. So I understood that. And when I was looking into sunscreen, I kind of had a hint, a vibe that when I was going to start talking about this big industry, that it might be hitting this big system in a sensitive spot. And it definitely did. I mean, immediately being deplatformed, being labeled for misinformation. I mean, being labeled as dangerous. Like, how is that dangerous when the research is showing that it could potentially cause pregnancy defects? So that is where, when you see the big picture, things
Yeah.
start to add up more easily. And how I went from this little homestead is I was just sharing my day to day. I became fixated, or not fixated, more interested in how I was nourishing my body. And that's where the Weston A. Price Foundation came into play, because I was vegetarian for 10 years. Okay.
Oh,
Yes. And I was listening to one of your podcasts, actually, and it was with a dentist, and he was talking about fluoride, but he made a comment about how he could always tell someone is vegan when they came in because their gums would bleed. And I was like, wait, my gums bleed, but I take immaculate care of my teeth. And so then I started researching more and more. And this was a few years ago, and I started eating meat. And so that was all in the homestead. And I started to see the connection with our food. I have cows in my field, and I was like, wow, these cows are loved and they're eating grass and it's regenerative, and all the animals in the field with them. And so I started to share that. And then I started to look at the ingredients. And then I started to look at the research and then sharing that with people. And that's how I've grown my platform to say, hey, look at what is going on. We are being poisoned.
yes. So it all kind of started to add up for you. You
Yes.
mentioned avoiding seed oils and noticing that you didn't burn. Was there any other dietary shift? Like, what did you notice, for example, Gubba, when you started eating meat?
When I started eating meat, so I suffered from brain fog a lot when I was vegetarian. Brain fog. Have not had brain fog again since eating meat. I feel like my skin, my hair, like my just overall health, and my family has noticed that. Before, when I was vegetarian, like I looked weak. And they are so happy that I eat meat now, because they're like, yes, like your color has returned. You look better. And so I noticed the brain fog right away. I noticed my fatigue was gone, and digestion issues. I had such bad digestion issues when I was vegetarian. And then eating meat, that first bite of the burger that I had, that's how I broke my vegetarianism. My body just knew that's what I needed, and it tasted so good. So that started into then the no seed oils that summer. And I was like, wow, I don't sunburn. There has to be something here, some sort of truth. And then started walking around barefoot. And I'd never slept so good as when I walk around barefoot. So it's all just piling on. And I love sharing this because people, even my family, are like, wait, walking around barefoot, that helps you sleep better? Wait, meat is helping you feel this good? Wait, no seed oils and you're not sunburning? Like, what is going on?
But you could have done all those things, Gubba, without having a homestead.
Yeah.
Why did you decide to launch into being an owner of? I mean, from what I see on Instagram, it looks like you've got a goat, maybe, or cows. I mean, tell us what you've got on the homestead and how you decided to get into it.
Yeah, so I have goats for my own source of raw milk, which is another sticky, very sticky topic online. That's another one that they will shut you down for. You
Yeah.
will have to come free for, but I have goats for raw milk, and it is so delicious. I have chickens for fresh chicken eggs every day. And I do allow farmers to use my property for grazing for cows.
Hmm.
So I love to do that, have the cows around. But being able to be out here. So when I say this, living in the city, I feel like you are disconnected from your food. You go to the grocery store, you don't know who raised that meat, you don't know who grew your produce, you don't know who's processing your food. So there's a large disconnect.
Hmm.
But it took me moving out here to see the cows in the field, to have that connection to my food, to really start to dive into this way of life. And I look at it as reconnecting to my roots of how my great grandparents homesteaded. But I did start in little ways when I lived in the city. I found a little farm store where they had farm fresh eggs and jams. And that was a great little breakaway from the whole disconnected way of living that I had been engaging myself in.
Yes, absolutely. Here at the Weston A. Price Foundation, we recommend that people know their farmer. And we have a whole list of chapters of the Weston A. Price Foundation around the world where people can reach out to the chapter leader and say, hey, what farms are in the area? What farms deliver in the area, so that people can get started on this real food journey. And your point is so valid, Gubba, that even in the city, we can get closer to our food source.
Yes, you absolutely can. Those chapters are so valuable because when I was starting out in the city, I found my local Weston A. Price chapter, and it was helpful. Helped me connect with others who were like-minded, who had this regenerative way of thinking, and you can find community through that. And community is so important. I feel like when you are starting on this journey, finding other people who are wanting to reconnect, because it can be daunting. And I feel like that is a large response I receive online. Like, how do I do this? But you guys give such a great way to do that with those local chapters.
Coming up, Gubba tells the story of her father's issues with severe eczema and what finally helped it resolve.
You're listening to the Wise Traditions podcast from the Weston A. Price Foundation. We pause now to recognize our sponsors.
Green Pasture Products. Green Pasture fermented cod liver oil is a superfood that contains real vitamins that your body can use. Real vitamins found in food are often made up of different compounds that act together to deliver nutrients to your body in a way that the body can use them. In Green Pasture Products, the oil contains a natural balance of omega-3 fatty acids and vitamins A and D. This makes it a wonderful vehicle to get the nutrients to the body in a way that they can be readily absorbed for better oral and overall health. Green Pasture products are fermented. It's the method that they use to gently extract oil from the livers. And what's also nice to know is that Green Pasture is a small family-owned company who dedicates their time to creating nutrient-rich products for their own family and yours. So check out their fermented cod liver oil and concentrated butter oil. Simply go to greenpasture.org to learn more about their nutrient-rich products and use the code WISE for 10% off your next order. Exclusions may apply. The offer ends on July 1st, 2025. So hurry and go to greenpasture.org now to learn more about their products and use the code WISE for 10% off. This offer expires, though, on July 1st, 2025. Keep that in mind. That's greenpasture.org. This is Hoda Labrada Gore, and you're listening to Wise Traditions. I know that you have a skincare line. What prompted you to get into that? I know you abandoned seed oils, but what made you think, hey, maybe I should do something to kind of keep nurturing myself, not only from the inside out, but from the outside in?
Yes, so this was actually prompted by my dad, so close family member, and he was struggling with severe eczema. I mean, it was his hands, his arms, face, neck. And what he did first was, you go to the dermatologist. What do? They prescribe topical steroids.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, send me what they gave you. And I started researching those topical steroids. Like, what are the side effects? Because you're not told that when you go in. And when I started to see how from the topical steroids, you can suffer from serious withdrawals because your skin becomes so used to that steroid. Once it doesn't have it anymore, then you have inflammation that comes up, your skin is thinned, and it can become something even worse than what the topical steroid was treating. And I said, no, we're not going to do this. He was already self-conscious about going out in public. And I said, no, we're not even going to risk this. And I started looking into more holistic skincare, and I stumbled upon tallow and started researching it. And I live out here on the homestead. I have an abundant supply of beef fat. But when it comes to beef fat and tallow, it is important to know and be aware of what the cows are eating. You do not want grain-fed feedlot tallow because they're going to have a higher omega-6 content, which can lead to inflammation and can disrupt your lipid bilayer. But when you find that grass-fed tallow, and I said, let's just try this. So I started making tallow for my dad. Within 2 weeks, his eczema had cleared up. His
Ah,
self-conscious, his self-conscious? No,
yeah, he was self-conscious, but that self-consciousness went away.
yes, his self-consciousness went away and he had confidence again. And it was mind-blowing. And that spurred me to, again, start looking at the ingredients in skincare. I mean, I used to have a big, long, complex skincare routine, everything they tell you, the dermatologist recommended products. I started looking at those ingredients too and comparing them against tallow. And I was like, what are we doing? These are affecting my hormones. These are affecting my lipid bilayer. These are deteriorating my skin. And ever since just using tallow daily, my skin has become more full. It's not dull. And it's just amazing to be able to take this to the world. And that's another thing that I'm sharing with people like sunscreen, like, hey, do you know what's in these products? Do you know what you are putting on your skin?
And I think what you're doing, maybe unintentionally, Gubba, too, is you're helping people realize that they can take their health into their own hands. They can start looking at the labels themselves. After all, that's what you did, right?
Yes. And I genuinely encourage that almost daily on my posts is read the ingredients. It's that simple because you're going to read the ingredients and see red 3 and you're going to be like, why would I have that in my drink? Or why do I have parabens in my skincare when they have been advocated against in hair care? They took them out of hair products, but they're still in the skincare products. What's going on here? So it just takes reading and then asking those questions. But I understand there's still that barrier, right? Where people have so much trust in these brands that are at the store. They think that just because it's on the shelf, it's okay. It's been approved by the FDA. It's totally good for me. But that's not true. So it's kind of more trying to break that barrier and help people get over that hump of, hey, they don't have your best interest in mind. You need to have your best interest in mind.
Yes. And aren't there also, I guess they call them proprietary secrets where the skincare companies don't have to divulge everything that they're using because they don't want people to replicate their products? Ostensibly, that's the reason. So you might not even see on the label some of the ingredients that are in there. Is that true?
Yes, that is true. And another thing that's concerning is in these ingredients that are going into skincare or even our food, some of them are so highly processed that they can be contaminated with known carcinogens. But they're like, oh, the amount is unknown. It's a possibility, but it's okay. Put it on your skin. And I think that's crazy. We
Yeah.
don't want to be using these highly processed products, but we've become so conditioned to them. And what's worse is that we have this medical system, these professionals who have gone to schools. So a lot of people look at them as, oh, they know better than me. They know so much more. But those doctors, some of them, these professionals, are receiving PR packages from these big brands. And do they really have your best interest in mind when they are in cahoots with these brands? Like, are they really looking at the research behind the ingredients on these brands? Or are they taking into account the kickbacks that they're getting? So it's a really slippery slope.
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. We always encourage people to, yes, read labels, but also follow the money trail, right? Like who's got your health in mind? Because when we are well, then nobody makes any money. The healthcare slash sick care system isn't making any money. The pharmaceutical companies aren't making any money. When we learn to make our own food, the restaurants aren't making any money. And I'm not saying you shouldn't go to the restaurant now and then, and perhaps you might need some temporary fix with a pharmaceutical. But generally speaking, we really want people to realize that they can break free of the system. But Gubba, I have to say, some of the things that you're saying sound oddly like those who are so strong against the system that they call themselves conspiracy theorists. And what's interesting is I've seen you almost egg people on. Okay, call me a conspiracy theorist. Don't you think that by inviting that label, it might damage your credibility?
I don't think so. I am more embracing the label of conspiracy theorists because there are people out there like us who are seeking truth and they don't have a platform. Okay. And so people think that they're crazy, calling them a conspiracy theorist. So I'm there for that person. And I'm saying, hey, I'm out here. I have the platform. I'm a conspiracy theorist and I'm thinking just like you. So I am encouraging it. I am embracing it because I think it's more, instead of conspiracy theorist, it's conspiracy realist. Like I'm just looking at the reality of the situation and I'm sharing it with the world.
Now, what if there's someone who is super skeptical and thinking, I bet Gubba, if I'm going to follow the money trail, Gubba just wants to sell her skincare line and then she wants to have a Gubba clothing line. Like, what would you say to the person who thinks you're like rallying against the man, but you're the man?
That actually, I've seen that in some of the comments online. Like, she's probably bought out by Big Pharma herself or Big Food. I think somebody was saying I was bought out by Big Food and I'm the opposing side. But I would say absolutely not. If I was bought out, I wouldn't be silenced. They wouldn't be deplatforming me. They would keep me up there. You see these people who are more controlled opposition type people, they have their platforms. And I am having my voice minimized, being shadow banned, posts taken down, threats coming in. So that's what I would say. I think there's more truth when people are being labeled as misinformation or they're being fact checked. There's something there.
Oh, and we can relate at the Weston A. Price Foundation. Our Instagram feed, unless you go look for us, our posts do not show up. And the same is true of you, I think, because I'm following you and I don't see your posts at all, hardly ever.
Yep. That has been reported to me. And I saw that with you guys on Instagram as well, that they were shutting you down and they totally do that. So it's just like, okay, well, I'm just going to keep voicing, whether it's on my website, gubbahomestead.com or other social medias. I just got to keep going on. And like I said, I think because they are silencing you, you have some truth. There's definitely some truth in your posts, and they don't want people to know that because it hits them in the pocketbooks.
Right. But this is the beautiful thing. I'm convinced, and tell me if you feel this way too. The truth and the light cannot be hidden. Like you can try, but eventually it comes out. So, I mean, you could even think of people who've been put into prison. My father is from Cuba. And so anyone who says anything against the government ends up in prison. Those political prisoners, you can't hide their light and people know what's really going on. You can't pretend it away or scurry it away, even if you try. So I'm kind of encouraged by this kind of what Sally calls the upwising of the crowd. The reason you have so many followers, the reason the foundation has so many members and so forth, the reason we're all going strong is because you can't keep a good man down.
I completely agree. And I really think that proof is in the pudding. Like people, when I'm talking about raw milk or tallow or my diet, I feel like I look healthy. My hair is healthy. My nails are healthy. My skin is healthy. So there's truth in that. When I was looking to the Weston A. Price Foundation and I started following your principles, I felt good. So I knew there was truth in that. And then listening to these other stories. So like you're saying, yes, truth really can't be hid.
And I don't think you have a family yet, do you?
I do not.
Okay. But have you gotten any testimonials from families who've kind of been following your journey and are trying to do the same thing? They're homesteading with you and they're like, oh my gosh, I feel so much better.
Yes, I do. I get messages like that daily, and it makes my heart feel so full. I can't even explain the feeling because when people reach out and they say, hey, I started reading the ingredient labels and it's taken me a while, but I'm making my own bread and I'm learning how to make things from scratch. Or I found a place where I can find local produce. That is so cool because it's much bigger than that. Just this family, they're then growing roots in their community. And communities are so powerful. So I look at each one of those messages I get that it's this little change going on in these pockets of communities around the world. And I love that. I love that. And it's really a big kick to the system because now people are starting to disconnect. They're starting to say, hey, I don't need your processed food. Like I can do this by myself in my kitchen. And I love that. I admire that. I cherish that.
Hey, and I just want to encourage you, Gubba. I know you're affecting thousands and millions of people, and we all are too. But even if tomorrow all of the platforms took all of our stuff down, again, the truth and the light can't be hidden. We're going to still have an impact on our immediate vicinity and then our larger community and then our broader state and so forth. And I'm actually telling you this, but also the listener, like it's so encouraging that we are going to have a ripple effect whether or not there are social media platforms, whether or not there's a podcast. Like, it's really encouraging because when you hit upon that truth, like, it's undeniable. And I also just want to point out that N equals 1. So you can read all the studies you want, but until you experience it for yourself, you kind of might not even know for sure what's right. But when you feel that difference of having meat in the diet or getting that sun on your skin, then there's no going back, right?
Yeah, there is no going back. And what I love so much is just your little community around you. Like you said, without social media, you can make such a huge impact. I was thinking about my parents who never gardened. We grew up in the city, but now my dad has this huge garden in his little suburban backyard. And he grew these amazing garlic bulbs this year. I mean, he is outdoing me in the garden, and it's only his, I think, second year of gardening. But just because I was interested in it and I started to talk to my parents about food, he started to build the garden boxes. He started to research soil, and he's now just this garden connoisseur. And it is so cool to see that. And so then people are inspired by him, and it just grows and grows and grows.
Oh my gosh, that's so beautiful. I love it. So now, Gubba, I want to pose to you the question we pose at the end here. If the listener could only do one thing to improve their health, a lot of folks listening are like, oh man, I'm on the struggle bus, as they say, like, I just can't get better, something's wrong. If they could just do one thing to improve their health, what would you recommend that they do?
I would recommend, and this is what I recommend to everyone, is to start homesteading. And what I mean by that is start in your kitchen, start cooking from scratch, even if it's just a loaf of bread or a batch of cookies or something simple like that. Just start there, because you're going to taste the difference. You're going to feel the difference. And then you're going to start asking questions like, wow, why did this bread taste so good? And why do these eggs that I sourced from the local farm taste so good? And you're going to start seeing these changes in your life, all because you started homesteading in your kitchen.
Beautiful words to end on, Gubba. Thank you so much for your time. On behalf of the Weston A. Price Foundation, we are grateful.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was an honor.
Our guest today was Gubba Homestead. You can visit her website, gubbahomestead.com, to learn more. And I am Hilda Labrada-Gore, the host and producer of this podcast for the Weston A. Price Foundation. You can find me at holistichilda.com. And for the transcript for this podcast episode, visit our website, westonaprice.org, and click on the podcast page. Remember to follow the Wise Traditions podcast on any podcast app. Whatever platform works for you, we're happy about. Keep listening, and remember that we actually have a Wise Traditions app if you don't want any third party involved and you're receiving this content. So listen up and share favorite interviews with friends. This helps us get the word out in a more personal way. And thank you so much for listening, my friend. Stay well, and remember to keep your feet on the ground and your face to the sun.
On behalf of the Weston A. Price Foundation, thanks for listening. We have many free resources to support you on your health journey. Visit westonaprice.org to find podcasts, articles, videos, and more. You can also find a local chapter near you for help in finding sources of great food. We invite you to support the Foundation's mission of education, research, and activism by becoming a member. Thanks again, and take care. Wise Traditions is a project of the Weston A. Price Foundation for wise traditions in food, farming, and the healing arts. The content on this podcast is provided for informational purposes only and is not intended to substitute for the advice provided by your doctor or other healthcare professional. It is not intended to be, nor does it constitute healthcare or medical advice.